There is no such thing as being perfect. You are not perfect. I am not perfect. Julie's not perfect. Today on Reader to Reader, we are going to discuss the spiritual perfectionism and tools that will assist you in overcoming or starting to unwind some of that perfectionism. So I am Mystic Michelle. I have Mystic Wisdom Healing. I am an intuitive mystic, Reiki master, herbalist, teacher, and space holder.
I'm Julie Johnson of Heart Alchemy and Soul Rise Holistic Counseling. I'm a counselor, energy healer, reader, and just like dancer, fun haver. I just do all sorts of things. I do whatever I want, really.
Yeah, I know. We have so many
We
pieces.
have so many things that we
So
do.
many pieces and parts. But all right, well, let's do this then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, something, especially over the past year, I've been thinking about, noticing, observing in myself is something that I think of as spiritual ego and spiritual perfectionism, which, like, at its core, it's just ego and perfectionism. It's the same thing. But the way I've been noticing it is I think I see this in myself and I see this with my friends on this spiritual growth path that we can do so much healing in our day-to-day lives and our patterning and things like that, and feel like we're really like leveling up and healing a lot of aspects of our wounds and patterns and our egos and all these things. But something I've noticed is I can then direct some of those patterns onto my spiritual healing process. So, like, if I'm doing certain practices or I have certain spiritual goals like manifestations or um, developing certain like energetic gifts and things like that, I can my perfectionism can come out in a way of like, if I'm not getting to where I think I need to be in the time I think I need it to be, um, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I must be doing something wrong. Or I just, yeah, I judge myself, or those little perfectionism ticks kind of come in. And I think of it as spiritual perfectionism and spiritual ego because it's in that plane. It's like, I think anyone who's like, I've just totally left the ego behind and it doesn't even matter, most likely they're probably now just in a spiritual ego, spiritual perfectionism, just a different layer of the same thing. Do you vibe with that? Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter if you're on a spiritual level or on and I'm not going to say mundane because it just seems critical, because if you're in the spirit realm or you're not. But like, if you're doing all of your healing and your work that you're supposed to do and you become a healer and you're trying to shoot for this perfection in your healing work, then have you really gone and healed that part of you that needs to be a perfectionist? Is that really, because I think that's where you're going with
that's a huge part of it.
With the lines of leveling up. So like, you're just taking it from one step into the next realm, like,
and it's just another opportunity to heal that very thing. It's not like no big deal, but we sometimes are blind to it.
Absolutely. It's like one of those, my metaphor I always use with my clients about like the healing is the onion, or like the spiral. You're going to face the same types of issues over and over again, but they're going to come at you in different layers and in different ways and different forms. And so the importance is to be recognizing and understanding that. And so perfectionism, especially when you're walking into, and especially starting out as a healer, is a very intimidating one to try to overlook, because we've got so many amazing elders and teachers that are there and have made a name for themselves, that we attempt to make ourselves look exactly like they are, or put ourselves at a high standard to be what they are, forgetting that at one point they were us. And that the more you do the work, the more, I'm going to use air quotes, of perfect you get to it, because not every, you can't be perfect in this realm.
Isn't that such a, perfectionism is such a widespread ism that so many people relate to.
Yes.
And nobody can define what perfect is. We all just like have these ideas in our brilliant little minds of this thing that we're supposed to get to that actually doesn't exist or make sense, or there's maybe actually a better version of ourselves that we can get to that excels beyond this limited idea of what we think perfect should be. But it's all an illusion. And I think what I've noticed in myself is I've had a very academic life, and I'm really good at academics and really good at like, oh, I know how to get a good grade on this, or I know how to write a solid essay or pass this test. I've got the steps all laid out. I know how to do it. I know I can, just put in the extra work to make it all happen. There's clear steps, and then there's a clear destination. Like, I'm going to get an A on that, or I'm going to complete that, or submit that assignment on time. And then when I do that enough, I complete the class, I complete the semester, I complete the degree, whatever. And I've noticed, especially over the past year of first year of starting my business and things like that, like, oh, it was that pattern, that kind of like academically trained pattern, that I started putting perfectionism on my spiritual growth in that way. It was like, oh, if I'm doing all these things to manifest and create more offerings and services and call in more clients and call in my partner and all these things, oh, there's all these things I'm doing, and I have all these practices and techniques, and I read all these books and follow all these amazing spiritual guides, but it's not happening. What the heck? Like, I had like meltdowns last year, very private ones. I kept them to myself.
Because we're the strong ones.
Because we're the strong ones, and I lived alone, which was amazing, but it gave me a lot of time to be in my spiritual process, and I could really see like, holy crap.
Well, and I think that that's another, being alone, you really have the opportunity to listen.
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes being the strong one and having a meltdown is actually a good thing, because like you get some of, like, I went through that just a few months ago, where all of a sudden this amazing clarity came in. But not to get too off track of what you were just talking about, like, so you're talking about breaking the patterns, but also I think something really important to think about too is breaking that construct. Because whether or not you're academic based, whether or not you chose to go to college, we are all programmed to be academic based, to fit into a box, to color inside the lines,
to follow directions.
We had handwriting classes that judged us on, I got judged on what direction my paper was facing. Like,
oh my goodness,
it needed to be upright, but I wrote out a diagonal. Like, it was, you're never going to write in a straight line because you're writing in a diagonal way. And I was just like, so like, that is how, even up when we're even children, without even being in that academic world, we are programmed into this perfectionism.
Yeah.
And the standard that we're supposed to hit. So like, even though you had these standards, you chose to go on to school and get a grade. It's our whole life.
Yeah.
Some people the opportunity to break out of that a little bit. I mean, obviously, I was one of those people who said F school and everything that has to do with school because I didn't want to draw on the lines. I didn't want to play in their boxes. But I would. I mean, I graduated with a 3.8.
Yeah.
But I did it on my own, in my own way, in a way that some of my other classmates are like, why did you do it that way? And I said, because y'all are working too damn hard. Because you're all trying to fit in that box of that perfection, where I'm just trying to get through this so I don't have to come back.
So what would you say, like, what do you have any like pearls of wisdom or learning from extracting yourself from that process? Like, what did you do or learn to kind of unschool yourself, so to say?
That's a really interesting way to put it, and I'm like trying to think of how I would do it. I guess how I, growing up with disabilities, learning disabilities, and highly intuitive and intelligent, I had the ways to kind of fake it and to fake the perfectionism and to fake the standards. And so I don't know if like I really ever cared enough to be a perfectionist in school. So like I guess that would be the pearl of wisdom is, who are you trying to impress? Like adults and I did not get along very well because they always put me in the dumb category because of my reading disability. But I had math and science skills that they couldn't dare to dream of.
So you basically, like, it didn't matter if you did well at these things, it couldn't please those adults anyway.
Yeah, and so learning who I was pleasing. Like, so when you're getting into this perfectionism, I think one of the greatest pearls of wisdom that I would have is, who are you pleasing? Are you trying to please yourself, or are you trying to please somebody else? Either way, they're not like, there's no reason to not like give something of quality to people,
right,
and to yourself, but to do it at the expense of yourself is what the issue is.
Yes. Or holding yourself to standards that keep you from actually creating or enjoying your experience as well.
Exactly.
Like,
yes, exactly. Or that take away from your authenticity.
yes.
So like part of a big thing, you know, I was a punk rock kid and a gothic kid when I was in high school, and a witchy woo woo kid. But one of my biggest things was I was trying to be my most authentic self. Well, if I'm trying to match the standards of everybody else, then I am trying to be other people and not live in my authenticity.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one way that I work outside of like that, where I where I kind of get away and break away from that perfectionism, is I remember that I'm doing things not to look like other people. And so there's no way to get a grade in that because no one's ever done it.
So you've practiced that more so than like to give like a beautiful, opposite isn't quite the right word, but like kind of reverse experience. I didn't have a learning disability. I had my, like everybody struggles with different things, right? But I didn't have a learning disability, so to speak. Actually always did well in school, and I got a lot of praise for it. I did well at things and I got a lot of praise. So, and I think I developed like a strong attachment to approval. Not not necessarily to be like other people, but I was pretty approved of, because I generally, this is people pleasing stuff. I generally did what people liked. But I had ways of being completely authentic anyway, right? It's just like,
but you created your value based on the praise that you were getting.
That, well, maybe not quite so black and white, because my value is also how I felt about myself and being authentic. I think it just so happens to be that a lot of the way I was as a kid, just naturally, in certain ways, was like enjoyable.
Yeah.
I was like a pretty enjoyable kid once I got over my screaming terrible 2s through 5s, But that's a whole thing.
I was like, don't get me started.
I know.
I was a preschool teacher. Don't get me started.
Yeah,
On that
that's
one.
that's like a whole other subject. But like just to reflect, like I actually, because this, like I was one of those kids where the system worked pretty well for me. I worked pretty well in the system.
Mm-hmm.
I had ways that I had paths that like the different kind of study, work, and travel opportunities that was me deeply expressing my authenticity and my alignment and making big choices away from the norm to do that. But that was clearer for me when it was like a big thing. It was a lot clearer.
I have 2 questions to ask.
Yeah.
The first one is, okay, so it was being part of your authentic self, but were you being part of your authentic self while still being that perfectionist?
Oh, sure. And
Yeah.
so many, yeah, it's all
It's all
woven,
woven
right?
together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's no, that's why I say it's like not black and white.
Yeah.
But what I learned, like not to get too much back in those days,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not as relevant to me now, but just seeing that as the patterning of, um, and it's probably a chicken and the egg kind of thing,
Yeah.
because a lot of my personality probably developed because when I did acted this way, I was praised, and when I acted this way, I wasn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all of us, right? But I think the pattern was I generally was able to find approval, even whether I was being like fully authentic or not. I was able to find it, and I was able to be flexible and adaptable enough that I could be aspects of myself and not rock any boats. And I could present myself and say, it wasn't being inauthentic. I wouldn't lie about myself. I wouldn't, but it was like, here's a facet of me, but I'm not going to show this part of myself to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So, like, and not to like, but in the same way, once you're becoming a people pleaser, you're being less authentic.
Sure.
Right? Because you're in that mode. And so
Yeah.
when you're trying to hit something to please
Absolutely.
others and to have perfectionism and draw, which I didn't realize until we started talking how closely people pleasing and perfectionism are actually
They
woven
really
together.
They really are.
Until this moment, I did not realize
I've been
that.
thinking about that a lot lately.
Yeah. So I guess the next question is when did you realize that you had a perfectionism complex, or like that you had perfectionism in you? Did you heal it before going into your healing practice, or did you just kind of squeak on by not realizing it was there and then be awakened to it in the spiritual healing realm?
Well, what's interesting is I think the people pleasing tendencies I've had are much clearer and have been much clearer to me, especially once I started seeing that that's what it was. Like I kind of saw it before I had those words.
Mm-hmm.
But the perfectionism was like a subtler undertone that I didn't start seeing really, because it's more like internal perfectionism. Like I'm like a hot mess in so many ways, to be honest. Like so it's I the perfectionism tendencies that I've had are not the ways that I understood perfectionism to be. I had friends who were like perfectionists, right? Like everything had to be perfect, and not I had a couple friends like this, not that many, but or their rooms had to be perfectly clean, or they had to get perfect grades or do whatever. There was some sort of like obsessiveness about it, that like an outward appearance of it that I didn't really have. I was kind of like always like kind of weird and noodly, like I still
weird
am.
and noodly.
like I'm not like I know I'm like so far from perfect, but whatever that means. But I think once I started, probably over the past 5 to 10 years, once I started seeing more of the people pleasing in a way that I started to understand it more, just be like, oh, like I could see how it damaged me. And then I started seeing the perfectionism underneath it. And then I think it became clearer, particularly coming into well, I did a major career change over the past few years. I became a counselor, and then I started getting into more spiritual healing and stuff like that. Okay, imposter syndrome. We could have whole talks
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
each of these subjects, but imposter syndrome and like, am I really like, can I really do this? And that's when but they do it so much better, just like you were talking about before. Or wait, like other counselors have like so many more trainings and certificates and all these things that they do and all these things. And then once you get into the spiritual healing world, that all happens again because there's so many different types of healers and professionals in the field. So that's actually when I started seeing, just at another level, the desire and need for approval, perfectionism, people pleasing, imposter syndrome, all this stuff. But perfectionism really comes, I think it really interacts with some of that people pleasing and imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I don't want to be perceived. How do I want to say this? What makes actual sense? I think my brain is like, there's so many things I could
So,
say.
so something I would say, because as walking into the healing world and
Mm-hmm.
like wanting to, having that imposter syndrome because you're just starting out, having
Mm-hmm.
that perfectionism, wanting to make sure you do right. I guess it puts it on another level because now your income is based off of how well you do.
Yes, it's
And
not
so
grades anymore.
it's your
Yeah.
income. And so it's like, so there's the test,
Yes.
right?
In a really, so I used to have salaried positions.
Mm-hmm.
Now suddenly, especially in private practice as a counselor and healer, etc., now it's based on, well, how many people believe in me and trust me with their care.
Right.
And that's a big deal.
That is a
It's
big deal.
scary and it's amazing.
It's scary and it's amazing, but I think, word of mouth is a huge thing in the healing world community, right? Like that is a big deal. If you have one bad client that,
Yeah.
whatever happened on that session,
Mm-hmm.
you weren't on or they weren't accepting of the
Or there
healing,
was a
there was a
misalignment. Yeah.
misalignment, and now they're out saying don't go to that person. So
Doesn't that play on the imposter
right,
syndrome and
the
perfectionism?
yeah,
Ooh,
yeah,
yeah.
like that all like ties
Yeah.
into it. So how do you step forward? Like how did
Yeah.
you start? Because this happened for you a year ago, where it's like
Particularly,
I
yes.
I I mean, I don't think it will ever be something that is like super gone. I think it's
No,
always going to be
it's a
an
process.
underlying thing.
Yeah.
I think a level of how much you care, especially if your clients are going
Mm-hmm.
up, those little things
Yeah.
are not going to matter as much. Like for me, I started taking healing sessions. Like I started doing healing sessions and getting paid for them in like 2021, at the end of
Mm-hmm.
21, beginning of 22,
Mm-hmm.
sometime period. So I haven't been doing it for a super long time, but like, that's when I started taking that income. And at the very beginning, I was like, oh, I got to do, like, I would have so much
Yeah.
anxiety about doing a client because what if I'm not on? What if I'm not tapped? What if I'm not? And
What if I'm imperfect?
what if I'm imperfect? What if they don't get what they need? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then for me in the healing world, I had to take a giant step back
Mm-hmm.
and be like, you know what? Calm down. This isn't about you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like, once I got that and was like, okay, yeah, that's right. It's not about me. I am the vessel that's offering the
Mm-hmm.
tools, and it's about them and their healing journey. And then I started getting more clients and more praise in a way, or
Yeah.
validation, getting more validation that what I'm
Yeah.
doing is actually helpful and assisting people on their journey. Then
Mm-hmm.
then those one or few people who look at me and be like, that's not right.
It doesn't
Like
matter.
it still kind of throws me a little
Oh,
bit
sure.
because I'm
You're only
just
human.
like, because I'm human and I'm just like, wait, what? I
Yeah.
know what I just said was right,
Yeah.
but don't, you just don't want to hear this. Anyway, so that was my long-winded way of saying like, okay, well, how did you start overcoming some of those?
I love that like journey
Yeah.
just took us on, because that highlights. So I was kind of referring a lot to like my perfectionism and people pleasing a lot in my inner journey and my personal growth. But when you take that as a healer, like all that is amplified because, especially like I first started kind of having this experience when I started doing my counseling internship, counseling people for the first time. It's a similar kind of thing. Like there's a lot of expectation that goes into it and a lot of hope on the client's part and all this. Just, is this going to be something that's, helpful? And so that's,
and even on like the healer compassionate side, these people are really in need and you just
yeah,
want to help them. You want them to be
yes,
healthy and happy.
yes.
And like, especially in counseling and even in tarot readings and stuff like that, in card reading and whatever the healing sessions you're doing, it can be a matter of life and death sometimes.
Yes,
like you can get people.
absolutely.
And so you do have this kind of expectation and this pressure.
I need to heal this person.
I want
I
to,
need
yeah,
to heal this
I
person.
need to do it.
And so I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think it's like, it's multifold here. Like what I've been to like kind of bring it back to like, how did I deal with this in myself? How do I still continue to deal with it? Because, I haven't healed it. It's always a process. And it's something that I'm seeing more and more. But one, absolutely learning like personal responsibility means I'm going to do the best that I can to be of service to you. And I have to trust and respect you enough that you have personal responsibility enough to do the best you can to interact with that service and direct your own healing, because I'm not actually responsible for saving you. And there's a lot of that misperception.
Oh, because then there's that savior's complex.
Yes, which we can so easily get, but
which every healer has at some point. Period.
It takes the perfectionism to a whole other level.
Yes.
And it's so much pressure, but it is not my job. It is something beyond me that I get to help facilitate. And it's something beyond you that's working with your body and your energy and all that, your psyche, everything. We're collaborating in this. And so I think that really helped me kind of having that mindset of like, anytime I get too much up here, like in a session,
Pardon me and my microphone.
Just total logistics. Oh, okay.
Well, because it makes a lot of noise. Anyways.
Totally so anytime, so something that I do practically, like in a session, for example, anytime I start getting, or even with talking to friends, right? Anytime I notice myself getting too attached to outcome, I'm pointing to my head because this is very mind-based and cognitive.
Because that's where the attachment is the outcome.
Where I'm like, oh, how do I fix this? How do I help them? How do I make sure that they have a good experience and feel served, or feel like this was helpful and that they got their money's worth? Like, how do I make sure they feel like they've improved something or they feel better?
Yeah.
Like, these are all good things. I want them to have good experiences, right? But when I'm there and trying to talk to somebody or work with somebody, it's not great. It's fine,
because then you're focused on the outcome and not being present in the moment.
Present is where the juice comes. Like,
it's where the woo comes.
It's where the woo comes. So anytime I notice that, which happens now and then, it happens sometimes multiple times in a session, I just remind myself, okay, back to heart.
Well, and I think that's a very good awareness, like you having awareness in where your mind goes.
Yeah. So it's a practice.
It's definitely a practice. Like when I do my Reiki sessions, I'm usually not talking. Right? So my brain can go wherever it goes.
Yeah.
And like, especially if I'm channeling or like anything and receiving messages about a situation, I can be like, oh, I've got to fix this, right? And then it becomes about me.
Yes.
And then and my brain and like, but this needs to go away, and so for me, what I do in those situations is one, the recognizing that like, hello, this is a partnership that's happening right now. This is not just, this is a collaboration that's happening. This is not you doing something. for somebody else. This is, you're offering tools, but this is
Mhm.
just as much as them doing something subconsciously or subconsciously.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like you were saying, that checking in and being like, you want this to be the best
Mhm.
situation in that respect. I always set the intention in every healing session I do
Mhm.
and every reading I do that this is for the highest good of both of us.
Yes.
And that kind of puts it in this bubble.
So I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to resonate with that because that's basically what I do as well.
Yeah.
Especially when I notice that happening, I connect and okay, like I'm I'm divine in myself, and my divine self is with me.
Yes.
Mystic Michelle is divine, and their divine self is with them. Like I kind of connect in with it's not just about you and me right here. It's about our highest divine selves. It's about much more than this physical experience.
Yeah.
So that practice for me has been really helpful. It helps me come back like, oh, it gives me a bigger perspective, like a wider perspective, not just here, but it
Yeah.
also centers me back into the present moment. And I point to my heart because that's where I feel like my
You're
attention kind of
present.
rests.
Yeah.
And that bringing that into the like personal perfectionism, um, that perspective needs to come in too. Anytime it's the noticing and
Hmm.
then the grace and love and perspective.
Yeah. And
Like,
not being mad at yourself because it
yes.
happened.
Or forgiving yourself if you do get mad at
Yeah.
yourself. And
Right.
so that's a
That's grace.
practice. Yeah. So I literally like so when I'm noticing like, "Ah, like why hasn't this happened for me yet? Or like I'm doing all this stuff, I must be doing it wrong because I'm not like at whatever goal I had or like when I'm doing that and I'm too outcomes based,
Yeah.
if I notice myself doing that, I say like, okay, I forgive the part of myself, or I see, or I love. It depends on what it feels like for me, but I love the part of myself that's judging myself as imperfect, or I love the part of myself that's judging myself as not doing it right. And then that kind of eases that part of me. And then I kind of go a little bit deeper, like, what else is coming up? Oh, I love the part of me that's actually just afraid right now.
Yeah.
And so I try to, when I, like you said, the first step is always just noticing that it's happening. That's like 80% of the battle, I feel like sometimes. And then,
99.9.
yeah, definitely. And then just being present with the different layers that are coming up. There's a reason I'm judging myself. And my ego, my mind, my perfectionism program is
Yeah.
actually just trying to protect me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it just wants me to be approved of and be safe. So if I can be gracious and just love the different layers of me, and I literally like will sometimes hand to heart and
Hmm.
like touch kind of like the sacral center too. Just hey, like I just sit and be with myself,
Yeah.
and it's kind of really similar feeling
Yes.
to client to counselor or healer. Like, oh, I'm getting distracted. I'm worried about the outcome. I'm worried about being the best or giving them the perfect experience or whatever. No, it's about love. It's about this moment. It's about flow. It's about what a miracle it is. We're even in the same room, like communing. So
Yeah.
let's see what magic happens through us.
Absolutely. And really quickly, I want to also touch base like on how being that perfectionist can actually create a block
Totally.
to your
Oh yeah,
manifestations, right? Like
totally.
if you're so focused, there's a patience and a trusting
Yes.
that comes from the universe and working in the spiritual realm. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
how can you put spirituality into any type of format? And at the end of the day, who knows who's really right? You just
Mm-hmm.
go with what's center based and feels good. Like what is really leading in that knowing. So
Yeah.
so first of all, let's start there. So if you're just using those words and setting it up in this
Mm-hmm.
awareness of I'm doing things for the highest good of everyone, not just like financial outcome, yes, is very
Mm-hmm.
important because we deserve to be compensated for the tools that we
Mm-hmm.
have, because
Mm-hmm.
back in the day they used to just build us houses and bring us food and we never had to do anything else. Now we live in a capitalistic world where we need money so that we can have a house.
Energy exchange.
You guys want to build me a house? I will give you all the free healing you want. I'm fine with that. But anyway, sorry, tangent there. But I was doing this video and I was creating this video and this subtle voice, and I've gotten a lot better at just being okay with the way that I look and okay that I don't look like everybody else, right? I've had this acceptance within myself that this is my authentic being and who I am, because people need to hear how I'm saying things, because there are people who understand things like I do, whereas you probably hear things and understand it a little bit differently. And so I was doing this video, and I was worried about the words or not saying it all right. And I watched the video and I plugged it in, and there was this itty bitty tiny voice that said, I hope this isn't the one that goes viral. And there was such a moment of clarity, because I've heard this voice before in my perfectionism, right? Like, because it wasn't what I want, the lighting wasn't right, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh my God, what if this could have been the one that went viral? What if this could have been? But I've already put that block because of my perfectionism. I have put a block up that is now preventing it from being whatever possibility it could be, because I'm putting that level of perfectionism on it, because I don't want to look back and go cringe. Oh my God, I can't believe that's how I used to do it.
Okay, first of all, I just want to validate the heck out of everything you just said. That like, it's okay. Like, the courage to do a video and put it out, even if the perfectionist part of you isn't satisfied. But then the ability to be aware of that voice, that, and then consider, am I energetically blocking it? And I want to take another layer and be like, is that one small voice, is that one small hope actually going to block a whole thing that could happen, whether you had that little doubt or worry or not, right? I think we can also put so much emphasis on, like, wait, if I have to do everything right for things to flow well. But actually, I'm wondering if, maybe you didn't create a block just by having that one little thought, right?
Fair.
Right? Maybe you didn't. Maybe it's the one that goes viral or not, but is that one little thought going to destroy everything? Probably not.
Probably not.
But it's amazing awareness on the blocks you can create.
It's a great awareness on how indefinite perfection, because I posted it anyways, right?
Which is amazing.
Whether or not. So part of overcoming perfectionism is just doing it.
Yeah.
And
you did.
You understanding, come on, did you like the clothes you wore 10 years ago? Did you look great in that outfit? I bet you have some cringe moments.
Yeah.
And so anytime I do videos or healings or have sessions, because I have failed terribly doing sessions before, right? I have just place plan because it was new.
Yeah.
But I can look back and see how much further the growth has come, and I can give myself grace and awareness that there are learning steps. You are never going to be perfect, especially if you're going to start doing, especially if you never start doing it.
And that's the block.
And
I think your awareness of hearing that little voice, like you said, it's been there before, but you heard it clearer. My perspective on that, if you don't mind me sharing.
Go right ahead. I love perspectives.
You're just getting that much better at seeing yourself and seeing the different parts of you. And you caught that, and you didn't go down that rabbit hole too much. I think from what you said, I don't know, maybe you did
once in a while, but I can see where I've done it other places. But what, one really valid thing for if you do go down the rabbit hole, because I have a lot of practice with letting go of voices that are, her name's Darla. Tell her to go sit down. you don't have the microphone right now. But another really thing that I do, I have that awareness that I can actually give a voice to that name, that perfectionist that wants me to complete things the right way. That's another tool that I have to use to overcome that perfectionism is
100%.
I've named that voice. And then if that voice is coming from outside everyone else, another healer gave me a really cool tool that I use all the time, and it's called Return to Sender. This is not mine. Goodbye. And so those are like some tools that you can use in this, because you're not going to be perfect. You're going to mess up. Acceptance is another tool of just and grace and allowing yourself to learn through the imperfections.
Yeah. And I love that. I love Return to Sender. I love naming it, Darla. That's amazing. I had another teacher, spiritual teacher, who said, when you like say or think something negative, whatever, just say cancel, clear. I cancel, clear that.
Control, Alt, Delete.
Yep. Cancel, clear. It's clear. That's a way to just kind of practice negating that thought. But in a slightly maybe more nuanced way is oh, I guess it's telling me I'm afraid. Oh, okay. Like just like you could also just be like, wow, there's a reason. There's a reason this thought is coming up. Probably just because it's trying to protect me in some way, or it's probably just because there's fear there, or there's some program running that does not believe that I can be successful, or fears that I will be, or whatever.
Exactly.
So it's just like all these different tools are beautiful.
You can deep dive into shadow work on that.
You can. Or you can move through it and see what else comes up.
Right. But it is important to recognize and see the thoughts and where they're coming from, because that's how that is healing.
That is healing.
That is the definition of healing.
It is healing, and but the very fact that, I know it sounds like you kind of posted it before and then had this thought, like, I hope it doesn't go viral.
Yeah.
Cancel, clear. But it sounds like you had doubts. You've probably had doubts about all your videos.
Oh.
But you're enacting, I think, a very practical healing of posting them anyway. But it sounds like you're gentle with yourself about it. So it's like you're doing the practical aligned steps of becoming a more and more healed version of yourself.
Right. I think there was another layer of that little thing where I actually had the thought process of, well, I'm going to post it anyways because it's not going to go viral.
Gotcha.
Which is where the block
layers.
Where the block does come in.
Many layers.
And so then that was that full thought process of, well, what if it did go viral?
It's the whole thing.
And it's not
We
good.
are complicated.
We are complicated, and it's all buried within. And all of the healing is just unpacking and understanding where it's coming from and learning how to just do it anyways.
Absolutely. And on that note, I feel like that's a perfect place to just conclude for now. We could talk about this for eons. Especially as we're both still seeing it and learning it in ourselves. But yeah, I think this is a good starting place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I hope though that this conversation was helpful for you guys and that you gained some tools and some clarity going forward in any perfectionism you might have. Bye-bye.